probably a bit least, it's very hard to follow everybody else, because how are you going to disagree with such wisdom and knowledge? So I thought what I would do is take the approach of being an AI. I'm going to do a vibe presentation. So what I say is based largely on what I've heard. And like all AI systems, it's very probabilistic. So the more times I've heard a particular thing, the more they're going to feature in my presentation. I may hallucinate as a result of something I heard over a coffee, who knows? From my analysis, my regression of the presentations I've heard, I think I find two themes emerge. One is very much about data. And to some extent, I'm a bit surprised, actually, by the amount of discussions we've had today about data. Because actually, I would have seen a similar level, I guess, of focus and discussion about data if I'd gone to just a general GIS conference, where we're worried about data analytics, we're worried about the quality of our data, we're worried about integrity, provenance, trust, all of those things that are fundamentally focused on the process of data collection, manipulation, and so on. And that's all very valid to have those concerns. It's all very valid for us to worry about this tsunami of data that is coming along, increasing volumes of data that is being captured and now communicated in near real time. And what does that mean for us as a community of geospatial experts? The other point, and I'm going to come back to the data in a moment, is about identity, and that's where the geospatial experts piece comes into this. But in terms of data and these massive volumes of data and worrying about them, I'm going to offer a maybe orthogonal view that isn't what I heard today, but I think it's perhaps an important reflection for us and what we do. Now, I hadn't prepared this presentation with Nick. We often end up on stage talking about things and we overlap enormously. So I've got a prop, which are metaglasses. And metaglasses, I think, is going to be very important for representing perhaps a different worldview that's going to be important to us. I can put these on, and they're quite weird, actually, because when I put them on and I ask questions, I had Judi Dench in my head telling me answers about the question I've just asked. So I could say, hey Meta, what's the weather forecast? Now I'm hearing Judi Dench telling me that it's going to be reasonably warm for the rest of the day and it's not going to rain. You can't hear that, fortunately. That's really hard to talk to you when you've got Judi Dench. All right. But the most important aspect I want to cover from these is the user interface. And the user interface, which is primarily based on the fact that it's connected via Bluetooth to my phone, so it's got a rough idea of where I am. More importantly, it's got a reasonably high resolution camera that can basically visualize everything I see in real time. Now, the point I'm going to make that's orthogonal to everything else that we've heard today is that I think what these represent is a future where data becomes actually less important. We capture less data than we currently do. Now let me go through the rationale behind this. We've lived through the last 50 years of basically digitizing everything, of capturing in a high level of precision where literally everything in the world is. I could pull out my phone and tell you, latitude and longitude of this particular lectern. And I could go and I could tell you the latitude and longitude of every point that represents the edge of this room, and I could do point and polygon overlay and work out the lectern, blah, blah, blah. And we do that for everything. We capture in high levels of precision the location of everything that we interact with. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, we navigated happily around the world without knowing where everything is in relation to everything else. We didn't need that level of discrete knowledge about where things are, because actually we spend most of our time interacting with things that we see in the world around us, which probably will stretch maybe a few hundred meters. So I'm only interested in where I am and the things that are within that little relative area that I'm navigating around. These devices will operate by actually recognizing what I see around me. Not knowing where something is precisely, but recognizing I'm looking out of the window at the Tower of London. It doesn't need to know where the Tower of London is, but it's analysing a picture of the Tower of London, comparing that with what my camera in my glasses are seeing, and joining the two together. So I can interact with the world around me without this huge requirement to capture more and more content. Remember, as cartographers, geographers, remember the story of Borges' map, the one-to-one map of the world. That is impossible to use because, in effect, it is the real world. Don't we run the risk of building Borges' map ourselves, digitally, a digital version of it that's unwieldy, expensive, difficult to maintain, when in reality, what we just need to be able to do is interact with the world around us. Now, that idea of just interacting with the world at that relatively small scale has become known as spatial computing. And that leads me on to my second point, which is perhaps the most important point. And that's about semantics and about what we call ourselves and what we do. I wish spatial computing hadn't been invented as a term, because it's yet another term. I wish geospatial had never been invented, because it's something else we have to explain to people. What we do, fundamentally, all of us in this room, we are geographers. We not only describe the world around us, we explain why the world is the way that it is. That's our job. We should be proud that's what we do, and we should stand up and always make sure that we're part of the conversation, proudly as geographers, saying, yes, we can explain why the world is the way it is. No compromises. As geographers, that's what we should do. As geographers, if we want to be able to communicate, to tell stories, we need cartography, because fundamentally cartography is about telling stories. And that's actually what I've heard very little about today. We haven't spoken about how powerful cartography is at telling geographical stories. How else can we tell stories about geography if not using cartography? Perhaps we become fixated about cartography meaning paper maps or traditional static ways of representing the world, or even we've become so fixated on visualization. Because not necessarily in this future of embedded devices and augmented reality, maybe we won't be visualizing information. We'll be using tactile responses or sound or something else to interact with the world around us. But the key point I want to make is that as cartographers, we should make the claim of saying we are the people that know how to communicate geographical concepts. We can tell the stories of geography, whether we're using digital mapping, paper mapping, augmented reality, some other form of communication we haven't even thought of. That should be our job. It shouldn't be anybody else. We shouldn't call ourselves geovisualizers. We're cartographers. The world recognizes what a cartographer is. No one's got any idea what a geovisualizing person is. And even those people that we hold up as, gods of our profession, Harry Beck, he never described himself as a cartographer. He was a designer. He came from a background of electrical engineering. But we, as cartographers, should claim this territory. This is what we do. We are the people that communicate geographical concepts. Because, hey, literally every story on the news tonight will have a huge element of geography in it. You know, the Straits of Hormuz, Greenland. Geopolitics is bigger now, more important, more part of our day-to-day lives than at any point in the last couple of decades. And as geographers and as cartographers, we should be much more involved in that process. So, my message, and I think it's something that I did pick up through the vibe of the room, is that, hey, this is our territory. We know how to do this. We can innovate in this space. What we probably need to do is to have a bit more confidence in who we are and what we do. It's tragic that there are no cartography courses at universities anymore. It's just wrong. And all of us, however we can manage to do it, should work on bringing cartography back. If geography is important, of course it is, cartography is equally important. Because if cartography fails, ultimately geography will fail, because we won't be able to tell the stories that as geographers we need to be able to do. So stand up, be proud, be a cartographer. Thank you very much.